I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
And this is TEX-TREK.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas, the home for Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we talk all about Star Trek all the time. And tonight is our 103rd installment. So we will be following up on what we talked about last time with the TEX-TREK Create-a-Trek challenge.
Yep. That was super fun to do, and we've got responses from people to read or in one case show on air. So this is going to be kind of fun. We're going to get to kind of talk about what people's thoughts were.
Yeah, so if you didn't check that out and don't know what we're talking about, we basically, Dave and I both kind of created our own idea of what would we do as a Star Trek show. We gave a setting and a cast of characters and some ideas for what we think would make like a good Star Trek show, and we asked other people to do the same, and we're going to go over some of those responses today. But if you'd like to...
Well, I think you're about to say what I was about to say, Fatheree, which is like, if there's anybody who hasn't done it, certainly there's no expiration on this. I would love to hear from anybody else who's got stuff, and if we got a few more and enough to do a little follow-up episode, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, essentially you just have to create like a title of a show, a setting, a premise, some characters, and let us know what would happen. Episode ideas, story arcs, whatever. You can kind of create anything you want. We actually have a sheet on our website, tex-trek.com, that has all this, all these, I don't like to call them requirements because it's so loosey-goosey, but all these questions that we're asking you to reply with, and if you do that, you will have a pitch for a Star Trek show all of your own.
You know what's fun for me, Fatheree, and we had very different approaches when we did ours. Yours was something that had been percolating in your head for quite a while, right?
Yes, yeah, something that I thought about a lot.
And mine was something that I worked up for the challenge. I was like, I turned over like 3 or 4 different ideas in my head. I was like, oh, I could do that. Oh, I could do that. I pulled for a few bits and pieces from different ones, and as I was writing it, the ideas kind of solidified in my head, and I ended up with something I really liked. But it's just interesting. Like I had to kind of like start doing it to make it happen.
Well, the advantage of your process is yours became like a little bit more relevant and timely than mine. But that's the price you pay, I guess, for not like
pandemic
doing
for the
like,
win.
spur of the moment. Before we get started, I do want to talk to you about like some Star Trek news, just because we did get some exciting news about a week ago that me and some Trek friends talked about on a live stream on our YouTube channel. But I just want to get your thoughts on the news of Star Trek Strange New Worlds coming soon to CBS All Access.
I'm for it. That's it. We've anybody who's followed us at all as we went through Discovery knows that I think everybody, you, me, Brian, and any guest stars we've had, I think everybody has universally enjoyed Anson Mount's portrayal of Pike. I think everybody was down with, or mostly down with, I want to say Spock and number 1. So, I've been generally a cheerleader for this show to happen from the first time we started thinking that maybe it might happen.
Yeah.
I'm definitely into it. I'm into the idea that it might be, that they're suggesting it'll be sort of more episodic. Anson Mount said, he promoted its optimistic perspective. Honestly,
and Akiva Goldsman has confirmed that it will be more episodic. He said it'll probably be closer to TOS than DS9 as far as how episodic it is.
When we start to cover it, can we edit in before that episode the bit from was it Star Trek Into Darkness where Kirk's narrating and he's like, things have started to feel a bit episodic.
No.
Let's throw that in there.
I didn't like that line.
We'll throw it in before. It's very meta. We'll throw it in before every single episode we cover. Now, I'm going to actually just exactly imitate him every single time we cover an episode of Pike. So not to bring up the antagonistic Orville show, but I've enjoyed the Orville, but with reservations at times, and I like the idea of a Trek challenger to its, I guess, more specific format, which is to say the episodic format. I would like to. This is really not to see. I don't necessarily need it for Orville to be dethroned. I'm happy that people are enjoying it too, but I want to see Trek back, kind of doing one of the things it was known for doing really well, which was cool episodic sci-fi. And I wouldn't mind if they stole that back from the Orville, since it's not something that's been. There's been episodic parts of Picard and Discovery, but it's not in their game plan mainly.
Yeah, no, yeah, like they were very clear from the beginning with both their shows that was not their intention, and that they don't really have any plans to do that with those shows. So it is going to be kind of a return to a classic style, which I am supportive of. I think with all these various Star Trek shows we're getting, I think it is good to have one or two that are like that, just for diversity's sake. Mm-hmm. And I think Lower Decks is also going to have a bit of that episodic nature based on some of the things they're saying there. Speaking of which,
just real quick, the interesting thing about Pike is that in a way they've already, of course, done a beta test for it. That we've already seen all those characters in various ways, shapes, or form in Discovery, and he got a lot of screen time. So I kind of feel extra confident about the show just because I've already seen him test the waters to it.
Yeah. No, Anson Mount as Pike is one of the best things that's happened to Star Trek in decades. Literally, of the last 20 years, him playing Pike is probably my favorite new thing that's come into the franchise. Right
on. I believe you were going to mention something about
Lower Decks. According to Mike McMahon, is still on schedule to come out this year. He says that they were doing a lot of remote work even before this pandemic kind of shut down Hollywood. Mm-hmm. He said they were able to record voice actor dialogue remotely, and I guess all the animators, I'm sure they can log into their computers from home and work on the show that way.
Yeah.
So that show is still going to come out this year, from what we're being told. And Discovery Season 3, we're looking forward to that one this year. The big delay there was Jeff Russo being able to conduct the music score.
Yeah.
They have now started remote recording. So they are hopefully going to be able to get that score complete and get us some Discovery before the end of the year. 2020, whatever you want to say about this year, looks like it will be the first year we have 3 Star Trek shows in 1 year. So at least we have that silver lining.
That's crazy. But yeah, that's cool.
That's all that we have on news. We're going to go ahead and jump into some of these TEX-TREK, Build-a-Trek, or Create-a-Trek challenge responses that we received. I was trying to make it Build-a-Bear, which I think was actually the original inspiration for the lame name that I gave it.
If you could go to the mall, to a Build-a-Trek store, and work through this, and then it would create little 3D holograms of all your characters, and you get a model of your ship and stuff like that. Would you pay $100? Would you do that?
I would rather pay for... Is that how much that bear cost?
I don't know. Sure.
But I would rather pay for the Star Trek than the bear. I would be like, oh yeah, give me an ambassador class ship. I'll take a Tellarite captain.
Yeah.
So customization.
I'll see if I can get... I'm going to start messaging and trolling the Build-A-Bear websites and social media and see if I can get them to switch over to this.
Go for it.
To Create-a-Trek stores.
Dave, I believe the first response that we were going to talk about was from Adam B. Owen, and he submitted this through Facebook.
Yep. We've got a relatively brisk one here, and it's first kind of a general description of the sort of the premise, and then he's got some notes on the cast, which I thought was a really cool cast listing here. So shall I just dive right on in?
Sure.
All right, so his show is called Star Trek Redemption. I'm just going to jump right in and read this. You'll forgive me if I butcher any names or accidentally stumble over a few things. All right, so he says, Starfleet sends a ship to travel for 5 years past the furthest point explored in a section of the Alpha or Beta Quadrant. Basically a very small ship with a very small crew, maybe less than 5, and they're tasked with deploying relay pods, signal boosters, to monitor and explore what they haven't seen yet. And he says, but here's where it gets interesting. The Federation uses low-grade offenders from a penal colony. All former Starfleet, all granted pardons and told they can go anywhere they wish when the mission is over. Their ship is tactically insignificant, basically a small survey vessel and maybe even one of a dozen other ships crewed in a similar fashion to chart the uncharted areas of space. Could be... he says anthology style, meeting new races and worlds, and some familiar faces too. The overarching theme of this story is some of the 5 crewmen want to make amends, while others just want to be off the penal colony. So he's got the Suicide Squad of Star Trek here.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like a certain suicidal squad.
What do you call it? Suicide Trek?
Or Task Force Trek.
Task Force Trek, the Dirty Trekson. Suicide Squad did not invent the notion, but I always like stories where prisoners are kind of forced to do shit. I do not advocate for this in real life, but as a fictional springboard, it's almost always entertaining. They usually do that kind of. There's something of that mix of some of them are kind of hardened bad dudes, and some of them are trying real hard for redemption, and everywhere in between. So. And let's indeed see who he has as the crew of this small ship in sort of the outlying areas of the Alpha and Beta quadrants. So he said it's commanded by Care Examar. He's a male, 75 years old, but he's a Bolian Andorian. It says one of 250 hybridized Bolian Andorians bred to colonize a world that was uninhabitable to either race, but conjoined, they created an ideal race. It says hybridization was done outside of the eye of the Federation. Eventually, the plan was scrapped and several of the 250 blended into Bolian society. Eventually, Care joined Starfleet, rose through the ranks, and was eventually imprisoned following an incident where he was sympathetic to the Maquis. So that's an interesting one. We haven't seen any, I don't think, too many hybrid sort of races like that.
Yeah, and he would. We know that he would be blue because both those people are
generally
that's true. Blue.
Thematic. The engineer, his name is Noy Gender or Gender. I don't know. I'm sorry. It's just Noy, and then it says gender/age unknown. I thought that was the part of the name at first. Unknown, one-of-a-kind alien arrested for committing criminal acts unbeknownst to his own culture cannot be transported for religious reasons. In reality, a hologram living in the hidden projection system of the USS Redemption, sent by Admiral Kelly to make sure the crew sticks to their assignment.
Yeah, you should say that he put religious in quotes. So
yes.
Guys cover up the actual purpose.
Absolutely. Then, as far as the rest of the crewmen, there's I'm going to butcher this name, Salfi Wes, S-A-L-F.
So I read it.
Is that how you say that? Salfi Wes, male, age 32, a joined Trill whose symbiote is 2,500 years old. The Trill have learned through Wes that any symbiote over the age of 2,000 begins to form aberrant behaviors. His last 3 hosts were selected for even temperament and moral temperament. All of them slowly began to exhibit violent and immoral traits upon joining. This is not an unknown occurrence for symbiotes of this age. He is sent on the Redemption to make the problem out of sight to the rest of the Federation. Not dangerous, just prone to instability and immorality. That sounds a little dangerous to me.
So we have a Trill who is an old asshole, it sounds like.
Yeah, I like the idea of adding a little bit of something like that to the Trill mythology.
Yeah, I do too.
Although I would have to say it's kind of immoral to just drop them off in prison colonies. Let's see. Rose Finley, female, age 25. Former Section 31 operative, captured en route to infect Vulcan with a reprogrammed Borg nanoprobes currently in her system. Fiercely loyal to the Federation and specifically Section 31, is capable of weaponizing nanoprobes or curing any ailment and even repairing bone and flesh damage. So she's got some pretty notable abilities.
Yeah, that sounds like the chick from the new Terminator movie.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see, then we have Tena Shassir, female, age 45, Bajoran ex-Maquis, arrested years after the dissolution of the Dominion-Cardassian alliance, destroyed a freighter of Ketracel White, headed for a small Dominion colony. Without the White, the Jem'Hadar rampaged and killed several hundred Bajoran citizens on a nearby space station. Eventually they were stopped. However, the source of the attack was traced back to Tena's attack. And let's see. And I think that is it. That's the full crew breakdown. So this is an interesting selection of ne'er-do-wells, I'm going to say. I think there'd be interesting room for growth or, I don't know, if you wanted to, for self-destruction. That's always fun, too.
Yeah, it would also be fun to see, like, who is going to grow and who is going to not.
For sure. I liked all those. That was like a really interesting selection of aliens, and I like the and humans. But I like the mixture of let's see, a lot of Deep Space Nine influences there, but also you've got actually I guess that's probably the key thing, because Section 31 was that first mentioned on DS9?
Correct.
That was its origin. So yeah, we've got references to Dominion, Cardassian. Section 31.
And even with Section 31 using nanotechnology, that kind of could be traced back to Star Trek Discovery, to the stuff they did with Leyland.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Anyway, yeah, that's Adam. I think that's a very cool idea. I think we talked about a little bit some of those crewmen in the comments on our Facebook page, but yeah, I'm down for Star Trek prison exploration show. A little bit down and dirty, but also it sounds like some of that episodic qualities that we like about Trek, and the exploratory stuff too.
Yeah.
Father, you got any other thoughts, or shall we jump to the next one?
I think this would be an interesting way to do kind of an edgier Star Trek show without necessarily betraying, Star Trek core values. As long as you do have some people in there that are trying to strive towards that Roddenberry idea. And it might be like more rewarding to watch, people that haven't developed that yet right out of the gate.
Right.
They're not like the perfect next generation crew assigned to the flagship in the first episode. These people would have a very organic arc built into the premise, and it kind of reminds me of this upcoming Section 31 show that we don't know much about, but I think it might have a similar type of vibe where it's people that might be nastier characters than we're used to on Star Trek, but I would be curious in seeing like those Star Trek ideal values kind of
tested.
Well, not so much tested, but kind of implemented into like a character's arc and showing some growth like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So what else we got?
Well, let's move on to a submission that we got from Trek on the Tube. If you are not subscribed to his YouTube channel, you should be. He also has a podcast called Trek Chat that I highly recommend because I have appeared on there, and so therefore it must be pretty good. But no, Sean over there does really good work. I've been a fan of his since before I even got to know him, and now that I've talked to him a little bit and I've gotten to know him over the years, I like him even more. He's a real swell cat, and he submitted a show called Star Trek Racers, and I love this because it is the most audacious one that we got. We did ask people to go boldly and be ambitious and go ahead and be weird if you want to. And this is certainly a unique idea.
Let me just ask, did you say Star Trek Racers?
I did.
Okay, hit it.
Kind of like, it reminds me of like the Star Wars Podcast Racers video game on Nintendo 64.
Yeah. Is that, now let me ask, because I have not seen this one yet. Is this also perhaps connected to Wacky Racers, the old cartoon?
It might be a similar format actually, but let me break it down. I'll have to ask Sean if that was his inspiration.
Okay.
So the setting is a Federation world about 17 years after the end of Voyager. So that puts it around 2395. Mm-hmm. And the premise here is that B'Elanna and Tom are married. They have 3 kids. They are living on a Federation world. I get the impression it's kind of like the outskirts of the Federation world. And Tom is a career pilot participating in dangerous adrenaline-pumping races, where they're like, racing like shuttles. They actually show some of this in an episode of Voyager, so it's kind of like grown out of that episode, this bigger idea for an entire show. And
I'm liking this so far.
B'Elanna is like, I get the impression she's like the pit crew chief. She's like working on the ships and stuff, and keeping them up and running. And there would be about 7 primary characters. Some of the other characters would be their 3 kids, ages 17, 14, and 10. So, we have like the little cute one who's 10. We can have like the 2 teenagers. And one of them would be old enough that you could maybe cast like, a sexy young person. Mm-hmm. And B'Elanna would be happy raising these kids on this really diverse world because she had a lot of baggage in Voyager of being this mixed race, half Klingon, half human. And so her kids are going to be mixed race too, but she's on like this very diverse world where they could blend in easier. I thought that was a really clever idea. Because that was one of her concerns, and Voyager's talking about like, how I don't want my children to deal with the same hardships as I did. It didn't fit in with the Klingons and fit in with the humans. So using the continuity there, I like that. And Tom is going to be having fun and in the races and teaching his kids how to pilot. So that sounds pretty awesome. We also get the character Captain Stren, who is a Starfleet Andorian female who drops by this planet from time to time to enforce Federation law. Mm-hmm. And rounding out the characters, there is a Cardassian male named Damek, officially the organizer of the races, unofficially a thug and criminal that holds illegal bets on the races, among some other crimes. So there's going to be like some underground organized crime type stuff going on that the heroes of the show will have to deal with from time to time.
I really like that this does not follow the traditional route of a bridge crew and all of that stuff. I'm glad that we got in this mix some ones that were pretty different.
Yeah, whatever you want to say about this, it definitely like breaks the mold, and it is interesting to think about. He goes on to say that B'Elanna and Tom settle on this world for the racing, but they find themselves dragged into ongoing illegal activities. The show deals not only with the struggle of their family to strive toward leading a peaceful, productive life, but also with the complications of the Federation, finding out what's going on here. And the show also deals with the challenge of maintaining the peace and distributing resources of the Federation fairly. So kind of like how does life work under Federation rule? What if you're like way out on the outskirts away from Earth and when Federation laws is being enforced? We'd actually get to see like life under the Federation a bit more than we normally would in Star Trek.
It sounds like I don't know if he was thinking about this, but like that is within the this is 17 years after Voyager.
Yeah.
And how long ago did Voyager actually end in real life?
2001.
So 19 years ago.
Yes.
Ish. So in other words, this would be an easy one where you can just straight up cast the actors exactly as they are now.
Yeah, I was reading this picturing Robert Duncan McNeil and Roxanne Dawson returning as their characters.
Now, I've been very slowly, as I am with all my Star Trek viewing, making my way through Voyager. I've not gotten to the end of it. But I know that, like, the B'Elanna and Tom relationship is not like a beloved Star Trek relationship. I don't know if it's disliked or anything, but people don't seem super into it necessarily.
I've never heard anyone complain about it. I mean, what I appreciate in the show is they actually take their time. They didn't rush into it. They kind of build it up, and
right.
It feels very organic the way that they become like when they first get together, like they're having sex with each other a lot, because that's how it is. Like when you first get into a relationship, right. And then they kind of become like. Like they move in together, and we see like the ups and downs of that, and then by the end of it, they feel like like they're a very stable, happy couple together, and it feels like a very like organic arc and a very nice, happy couple. Which
you know what I think I might have been remembering a little bit more of like how. I'm going to say people somewhat, if not exclusively, adversely reacted to 7 of 9 and to Chakotay.
Oh, yeah, that's terrible. Yeah. Let's talk about that.
I think it's more like they maybe it just doesn't, the Tom B'Elanna thing just doesn't get mentioned a lot that I noticed. But anyway, it's not to say it's neither here nor there on the pitch, other than that I think it would be interesting in that it would offer a chance to deepen a relationship, to do sort of what they did. We saw hinted at with Riker and Troy, which is to say, show a couple that's been together a while and what they're like in slightly later years. There's some interesting possibilities that we haven't seen like front and center in Trek.
You know what? I'm gonna say that I like the B'Elanna Tom relationship more than the Riker Troy relationship.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Well, the Riker
I don't
Troy
mind Riker and Troy ending up together, but I don't see that as like the only option that they had. Maybe it would have been more interesting if they went in different directions, but
I mean, arguably that was the whole history of TNG,
Yeah. But what else you got on Star Trek Racers? Anything else?
I nothing other than to say that I like this premise. It sounds like it could range around a little bit and have both like some family drama and then this sort of these intrigues with the gangland seedy side of racing. A little. It sounds like there could be some elements of a little Fast and Furious going on there.
Oh yeah.
Of the spaceways. I hear family is a bit of a thing in those movies. And,
you would know. I've never seen any of them, but
it's a thing. It's a thing.
I know that you like them, and I see like a bunch of memes and stuff of that. So,
like, I wouldn't want Star Trek to quite go in the very wild, ridiculous physics territory that they do. They are kind of very cartoonish movies, and knowingly so, and that's kind of what I like about them. But seeing Tom, this would probably also have some elements of those racing movies like Days of Thunder and stuff like that, where you get somebody who's been like kind of a hothead at times, like Tom has, and see them have to break in a new generation, find themselves, figure out where they are, how much of that energy is needed on the the track or the spaceways or whatever, and how much is dangerous, and what he's going to impart to his kids. I actually think you could do a fair amount with the premise, and I like the idea of being on the fringe of Federation, hospitality, so that they don't, they're a little bit, times might be a bit tougher, I guess.
Yeah, and it sounds like, in some ways, like the Federation might almost be like a little antagonistic if they're having to come like enforce law on this like not quite lawless planet, but a little bit more.
It's just remote,
rougher frontier planet.
Yeah, for sure. No, but I like it. Shall we jump on to Brian's submission?
Yeah, the one that our frequent guest Brian has provided.
Yep. And he's Brian, like me, and occasionally you, Fatheree, is a role-playing game guy. He's a dungeon master, game master guy. I say dungeon master, that's D&D specific, and I don't think he does D&D too often. He's a game master, though, and he He is a guy who thinks about world building. He wrote us a fairly large write-up, which is cool. And so I'm just going to dive right in. There may be a few places where I summarize it a little bit, but I'm going to try and just knock out all the main stuff that he wrote down.
Yeah, we're doing good on time, so if you want to if you want to give us the fuller version, I think we have time for it.
All right, let's do it. So the title of his show is either Star Trek First Frontier or Star Trek Franklin, and he says the setting is on board the Freedom class ship, the Franklin, seen in Star Trek Beyond. That is, and I'm going to quick break from what he wrote to just say, yeah, if you remember, that was the Idris Elba's ship that
yes.
was how old at the time? A couple hundred years old?
It would have been over 100 years old.
Yeah, dating back to circa the Enterprise series.
Yeah.
And it has a little bit of the look of the of Enterprise circa that era. It's a cool looking ship. Well, it was what they were flying around. At the end of the whole last half of the movie.
Yeah, when they were blasting Beastie Boys.
Blasting Sabotage. Yeah. Anyway, so Brian goes on. The Franklin is the second Freedom-class ship produced by Starfleet and the first actually to be able to reach and sustain warp factor 4. Only the captain and XO get their own quarters. There are 3 decks, 137 meters long, crew of 30. The ship is cramped and full of people. As for the time period, he says 2149 or 2150, basically a year or two before Enterprise. As the show continues, it will overlap with and reference the events of those seasons of Enterprise. He says there's a little note he's made here. He says, not sure how well this jives with continuity, but if they can jam Discovery's visual reboot into continuity, then this should be easy to handle. Some Enterprise fans might be offended as First Frontier does outright compete with that show. On the other hand, I suspect most Enterprise fans would be happy to have another show set in that time that further explores that era.
Yeah, more blue jumpsuits.
Yep. So here's his premise. As Earth's first dramatically fast spaceship quests for the truth, it will forge the Starfleet that audiences have come to know. But are they ready for disease and danger wrapped in darkness and silence that is the frontier? His other description of the premise is what they should have done instead of Star Trek Enterprise. So this is his sort of own vision of a frontier sort of Enterprise type show with the ship that was kind of retconned, I guess, into Enterprise era existence via Star Trek Beyond. Character-wise, he says the ship's crew is made of Starfleet personnel and a squad of Makos. In this era, Starfleet is much more a military organization whose primary purpose is protecting Earth, human colonies, and human ships from threats from outer space. The Starfleet personnel goes like this. Captain Alexandra Erickson, early 50s, female, African-American descent, tough as nails, naval captain, respects competence and professionalism. She is nominally Christian but doesn't let it get in the way of her job. She used to be married, but her spouse has passed on. She has a very deep respect and friendship for Major Mclaren, who we'll get to. She's on a mission to find those Orion pirates and neutralize them. You'll see more about the Orion pirates in a bit. Ideally, that means damaging enough of their ships that they decide not to mess with humanity, but she's not adverse to just blowing them to hell if she's pushed. Erickson's son served on a human freighter and was killed by Orion pirates. She's developed a deep dislike for scientists due to their science for science attitudes. She is very practical, and a dismissiveness of religion. So yes, this is stuff that she does not like about her science crew. However, she will follow orders even if those orders are to integrate a bunch of brain trusts into her command structure. Let's see. Then we've got Lieutenant Irfan Chabert, or Chabert, I don't know how you would say it quite. Late 20s, male, Arabic descent. Relentlessly confident tactical officer. Fascinated by the strategic and tactical possibilities of space, and obsessed with learning as much as possible about the strategies and weapons of other species. He feels any foe can be defeated as long as you have enough information. Unlike on later Starfleet ships, Jabar's tactical station also fulfills the role of science fiction, in that he is responsible for collecting data on anything they encounter with the ship's sensors. He is Muslim and knows that as long as he does his best, whatever happens to him is part of God's plan, which is the source of much of his confidence. In truth, he's a bit of a repressed nerd and will likely end up developing an adversarial relationship with Chief Science Officer Kernsky as they bond over their love of learning about alien stuff. As the show goes on, this friendship will eventually turn romantic if he can ever admit to his feelings. And the last of the Starfleet personnel is Major Wyatt Mclaren. Late 40s, male, Scottish descent, leader of the Makos, and generally in charge. Let me just quick interrupt here. Remind me from Enterprise, Makos are they're like
the Marines.
They're Marines, yeah. What is it? Does it stand for something that you can easily spit out?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but
don't worry. You can overdub it in there if you think
it's normally pronounced Makos.
Makos, cool. Thanks. That was the other reason I wanted to bring it up. Makos it is. Leader of the Makos and generally in charge of all boarding parties and landing parties. He can be loud and aggressive, but knows that making enemies is not humanity's best interest. Loves a good explosion and a good drink. Is an old friend of Captain Erickson, and they have served together for years. He should be in charge of a lot more Makos than he's got, but took the assignment to work with Erickson again. To most, he's the fun one. He's seen too much death to have any faith. Feels that humanity will always be violent and flawed, but keeps all this buried under his boisterous talk. Over the course of the series, he will learn that a good thumping, or the threat of one, isn't the best answer to most questions. Will probably relate well to the Klingons when he gets to know them. So let's see. This is the person with whom who is it? Who was going to possibly have a relationship? That is actually, I guess, the captain. Or no, she has a deep friendship with him. That's all. Sorry, I was thinking of the other gentleman. All right, so these are the Starfleet personnel, but they are working with the United Earth Space Probe Agency personnel. And the note here says, shortly before the Franklin launches on his mission, UESPA finally convinces the United Earth government that this mission is too much of an opportunity for exploration and space stuff to be passed up. The last man, UESPA, is that, I'd say
ESPA is how they say that.
Oh,
that's what they said in the first season of the original series before they were like, that's a dumb name, we should call it Starfleet.
Interesting, okay. He's doing some old school. Was this also frequently mentioned on Enterprise?
No, but it was mentioned in the Voyager episode where they have like a probe from the early 22nd century, so it kind of ties in there.
Okay. So, but Brian's doing a little bit of historical callback here,
yeah.
And no doubt cringing as I failed to call it ESPA, but we'll move on to that now, as well as Makos. The last man ESPA ship disappeared. It is thought by many that putting this new team on a military Starfleet ship might keep them alive so they can make it back. Also, United Earth wants the scientists to reverse engineer the Orion ships that they disable so that Earth can gain understanding of more advanced technology. Unofficially, the doves in the government also fear what sort of impression Captain Erickson might make in first contact scenarios. They feel that Kernsky, we're about to get to, and his team could offer another side to humanity. So, at virtually the last minute, ESPA is given the go-ahead to put a team on the Franklin, a team that will serve as officers with its lead acting as first officer of the ship. Erickson hates this idea, but she will follow orders, including the orders to listen to these eggheads. The fact that the ESPA team was a bit thrown together and represents true genius more than true professionalism does not sit well with her. All right, so we've got the sort of more militaristic Starfleet personnel and the ESPA personnel, and let's get into who will be in there. Got Chief Science Officer Flynn Kernsky, mid-30s, male, Swedish descent, lead biologist and first officer of the Franklin. Gets to do all the XO stuff as well as most of the doctoring. Fascinated by alien life, alien sociology, and alien psychology. Also obsessed with Vulcans and will spend time with Master Tassar, trying to learn the path of Surak. He can be naively optimistic, but he's also perfectly willing to stand up to Erickson if lives are on the line. He also feels that Starfleet's gunboat diplomacy is leading them to make the same mistakes that caused World War III. Kernsky believes that there should be ways that Starfleet military and ESPA scientists work together and is eager to find them. He does not believe in God or any form of the supernatural. Kernsky is often essential for figuring out what the motivations of the various aliens are. He will become a very argumentative friend and eventually more with Chabert.
Right, that was the romance that he talked about.
Yes. Chief Engineer Amelia Freixa? How do you say that in like Spanish? Freixa.
It would be Freya.
Freya. All right. Chief Engineer Amelia Freya, early 20s, female, Latino, Chief engineer and effectively head physicist of the team. Handles all the exotic subspace quantum stuff that the ship finds. She's a genius, but very much all theory and no practice. Definitely the inexperienced youngster of the ship, but totally fearless about following her curiosity. She's also quite excited to get her hands on alien tech and alien science books. That's a thing that I kind of wish that we saw. I know that showing people reading over technical journals doesn't sound interesting in Star Trek, but in the serial ones, I feel like you could. I'd like to see someone kind of more passionate about their research and stuff like that. I think that'd be kind of neat. Anyway, Brian continues. Based on some of the high-end physics she's done, she's developed a theory that the universe might have been created. She'll need a lot of data from a large area of space to have any hope of proving or disproving her theory. She will eventually develop a romance with Sorvak. So that's another Vulcan we'll get to in a minute. Now, we can see, and I'm just going to jump right in for just a second, that faith is something that weaves in and out of several of the characters in this, which is not usually something that's a big thing in Star Trek, and I thought it was interesting and kind of cool that Brian brought that to the fore. Father, you probably remember this came up in a few of our discussions about Star Trek. I don't know if it was like we were talking Star Trek 5 or what, but it's come up a few times that Brian had some interest in, what it would be like to have a crew member of faith, and so he is included in this, and I think that's an interesting one because it's also countering. Well, I don't know if I'd say countering. That is the very logical Vulcans, and I like both of these characters that he's thrown in there. We have Master Tassar, looks to be about 60, actually coming up on 200. Female, Vulcan. Master Tassar volunteered to join the Franklin to make sure they didn't get into trouble. She is incredibly wise and zen, generally just observing and refusing to provide any real advice. She wants humanity to figure things out on their own and will only interfere if they are truly lost. Her definition of truly lost is a lot more dire than most "oh my god, we're all going to die" moments that a weekly Trek series has. She will offer occasional philosophical, psychological, or ethical advice if she thinks you are ready for it. Part Guinan from TNG, part Kosh from Babylon 5, and I assume that's the part that is much more reticent to step in. You're going to get some very slow reveals. Part Kosh from Babylon 5, she often gives the impression that she's already solved the problem of the week and is waiting for the humans to figure it out. Despite her age, she will eventually be revealed to be a total martial arts expert who can outfight anyone on the ship. She has a secret reason for being on board. If the crew looks like they're going to touch off another Klingon jihad, she will do whatever is necessary to prevent it, even destroy the ship. Serving under her is Acolyte Sorvak, early 20s, male, Vulcan. Sorvak is Tassar's apprentice. He is totally dedicated to her instructions, and the two of them have many discussions about how strange the humans are. He's fascinated by humanity and is constantly asking questions. Unlike Tassar, he doesn't hold back his knowledge, but his inexperience is such that he rarely knows more than the humans. Amelia and Flynn will both be quite receptive to his questions, but Sorvak knows he needs to understand the more militant humans as well if he wants to truly grasp humanity. I like these two Vulcan characters, and I like the idea of them kind of as a duo, somewhat getting behind the scenes discussions, a little bit like, I don't know. You remember when Spock and Saavik talk in Star Trek II, Fatheree?
Yeah, and I also get some conversations like that in Voyager between Seven of Nine and Tuvok, as like the two computer-minded, rational intellectuals. And I guess we might see in Strange New Worlds with Spock and Number One.
Absolutely. There's one other character who's a secondary character that I like, Zoth, who is a male Tellarite who seems like he's roughly in his 40s. Zoth is a merchant who the crew will occasionally run into. The crew of the Franklin help him out with some Orion pirates near the beginning, and he takes a bit of a shine to them from that point on. He tries to come off as a gruff, money-grubbing free trader, but he's got a heart of gold buried deep down, and will often find ways to sell the Franklin whatever they need. Hates Vulcans, and doesn't approve of how the Vulcans are limiting humanity, and will cheerfully provide access to his more advanced tech for a fee. Sometimes he appears in the nick of time to help out, other times he's in a fix, and the crew has to rescue him.
I like it.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, there's one additional one. This is, I guess I would say, a pretty key one. Second Lieutenant Balthazar Edison. Mid-20s, male, African-American descent, Major McLaren's number 2. Yes, it's Idris Elba's character, played by a younger actor. He survived a terrible childhood and joined the Makos to escape it. suspicious and aggressive with people he doesn't know well. But if you become part of his family, then he will burn the galaxy down to keep you safe. At the start of the show, the family is only the Makos on board, but it will grow. Eventually, we see why he will end up becoming captain of the ship at the end of the series, and see why he will never be able to accept the United Federation of Planets. So, big story arc stuff there. I thought that was kind of cool. Finally, here's let's see. Well, not finally, but like closing in on it here. He says, "What's in response to what is the show like?" Says here's the big premise: the Orion pirates are raiding human ships and colonies. It's up to the Franklin to put a stop to them to that. The Orion raiding ships are small and easily swatted by the Franklin, but they have to find them. This is the excuse for why the ship is zipping all over the place, chasing down distress signals and leads to hidden pirate coves. Well, this gives a bit of the arc. The series will be Planet, Ship, Anomaly of the Week in format. But humanity is not ready for what is out there. The Vulcans warned them that this would all end in tears, and for much of the first season or two, it looks like the Vulcans were right. But through ingenuity, raw bloody-mindedness, and a little help from Zoth and Tassar, they will survive, make discoveries, and build bridges. They'll have almost no communications with Earth. They can construct and launch unmanned warp courier drones that take reports back to Earth. Earth can send couriers to the Franklin, but only if they tell Earth where they are going to be in a week. Their ship is untested and will often have one sort of breakdown or another. There are not a lot of safety backups. Most of the cool tech that we associate with the Federation hasn't been invented yet. No shields, no transporters, no phase pistols, no food synthesizers, shuttle pods have very limited fuel. The artificial gravity is a new thing that they're still working the bugs out of. They will discover a lot of the future Star Trek tech in the series. Shields, communicators, tractor beams, etc. Some of it they can reverse engineer and start using immediately. Other tech turns out to be very dangerous when tested and will have to be left in the cargo hold for the time being. And very much in the fulfilling also a little bit of Dr. McCoy's description here. He says space is dangerous. There will be lots of The Martian and the new Lost in Space problem solving to deal with issues in space and on alien worlds. Radiation storms, black holes, solar flares, asteroids, running out of oxygen, decompression, freezing. They'll have to face all of it. The people in space are dangerous. Over 150 years ago, the Orion Empire triggered a massive attack from the Klingons. They swept across the Beta Quadrant, destroying every colony and ship they came across. The Orion Empire was destroyed, and what's left is pirates and merchants. Now most of the warp-capable species are very cautious about space exploration. The humans look a bit crazy, careening all over the quadrant, chasing down Orions and checking out every unexplored planet they can find, and many worry that could set the Klingons off again. The Starfleeters like to negotiate from a position of strength. They are prone to retreating if they don't feel they have a military advantage. While not so jarhead as to shoot first, ask questions later, once they do start shooting, it's very hard to get them to stop. They aren't good at wrapping their heads around other cultures, and so are prone to miscommunications. The ESPA scientists act as a moderating influence on all of these tendencies. It would be easy to make the scientists the good guys and the military types the bad guys, but that will not be the case. The scientists start super naive, overly optimistic, and too truthful. They lack training for how to deal with a crisis and are prone to panic or despair. They can become so wrapped up in their discoveries that they lose sight of the bigger picture. The more militant Starfleet crew are there to help them through all of this. The show will start with the two groups being at loggerheads on almost every issue, with the captain usually doing what she thinks is right. But through trial and error and through helping each other, through those errors, the two factions will meld into a single, focused, and highly functional crew. The success of this will lead to the exploration and self-defense-oriented Starfleet that we see in later Star Trek shows. Overall, the types of stories can include a lot of the classic Star Trek tropes, but with the emphasis being on the character interactions and struggles rather than the external mechanics of this issue. Okay, and so then he closes out by describing some of what might go down in some specific episodes, and I'll just sort of just quick summarize those. He wanted to have some stories that about like the finding out that the Orions haven't actually been spacing the crews of the freighters that they raid like they thought, and so that in fact they've been capturing them and selling them as slaves. So the captain's going to find out her son, who she thought was dead, has actually probably been enslaved somewhere and could be in need of rescue. And because they're so remote from Starfleet and it's hard to kind of get orders updated to them, they're going to be doing some probably ignoring of Starfleet orders in order to go on missions to rescue various slaves and that could be kind of like a dangerous, obsessive sort of thing. There's also going to be some ties to kind of, what would you say, Fatheree? Like, sort of like some classic Star Trek tech and stuff like that in there. Subspace radio being developed, I think, in place of the courier drones. Let's see. Getting the NX warp engines up to class 5, getting up to warp 5 on their engines by using some tech that Zoth gave them from Pirates.
Playing around with the transporter when they recover some alien transporter technology. And he also mentioned a story idea where the season 1 finale could be the Franklin making first contact with the Klingons, and it actually goes a little bit worse, it sounds like, than it went on Enterprise. But of course, this is so far out of range that they don't hear about it back on Earth. And this idea of like they're worried about like the Klingons starting another major war, it does kind of lead into what will eventually happen in Star Trek Discovery. That finally does happen.
I see that he wanted to eventually take in a few seasons in, get them back to Earth and maybe do a visit to Vulcan and culminate in the Earth-Romulan War for his final season.
Which I've always wanted to see, the Earth-Romulan War. I hate that we did not get a few more seasons of Enterprise where Manny Coto would have the opportunity to show that to us, because I think that would have been a really cool way to end Enterprise and show like the forging of the Federation.
Yeah, absolutely. Just gonna be one of those lost things unless they come around. It'd be cool if, honestly, I guess if they were to ever do a well, first of all, obviously they should just make Brian's show. Just throw some money at it. But like if they did like a 1 or 2 season show, I know like building all the sets and stuff for that would be probably mean that you like want to get enough out of it that you do more than that. But I actually like the idea of them, like, if there's some areas of Star Trek history they want to explore, do a shorter season or 2. Try it out.
Where they could have made that trilogy of movies that they talked about years ago. We're getting a little off topic here, but Austin, Texas-based website Ain't It Cool News broke a story a long time ago about a Romulan War film trilogy that was proposed right after Enterprise was canceled. Which didn't get the green light from Paramount, but that would have been cool, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, there's always the possibility. I like to imagine that they would have been cool. There's some alternate universe where it's cooler, and they didn't get a pandemic. Fatheree, so Brian's got a pretty elaborate pitch here. Thoughts? Anything to throw in on there?
It's interesting. A lot of it kind of sounds like it would be kind of alternative to Enterprise. Right. It's different enough. It's not exactly retreading the same material, but this would be like, this was the actual first mission. And I know that one thing just from having conversations with Brian, he always wished that Enterprise did feel a little bit more closer to today's technology, where space is more dangerous. And it was one of the ways they described the show early on before it came out. I remember hearing about this, but they would be showing like the development of all the Star Trek technology, just like those typical things that we take for granted as like standard in Star Trek, like Prime Directive, the new tech, you could even add in here like the balance of military versus diplomacy and how that hybrid kind of creates traditional Starfleet. It's very much kind of like a Star Trek origin story, but it's still set in the future of today, so you can still have fun, cool sci-fi stuff.
You know what I kind of like is as far as like when you have Idris Elba's character in it, somebody who's destined to become commander of the ship, and I presume this means like if he takes over the ship at the end, and it's in such a way that he essentially turns his back on the Federation. Then you have at least for him and perhaps for the crew, a kind of a dark ending, because we know that this leads to him becoming, sort of a madman in the, centuries to come for Star Trek Beyond. I do kind of like that as like, like I feel like you can end overall hopeful for, humanity, Federation, but have a dark turn for the character, an individual character and the crew. I would be interested to see in a show like this how that balance would be found, and I'd be curious to I'll talk with Brian more about this in the next week or two and see how he envisioned that happening. I'd be curious tonally, like how do you keep that optimism of Star Trek, even when this is like the Star Wars prequel problem, like how do you end Revenge of the Sith with a sort of certain degree of hopefulness, but it's also all about the rise of the Empire.
Well, I'm not going to touch that last part you said there, but
I'm just saying, like, this is actually devoid of like a quality, just that it is like it is a tonal conundrum, and I think that's an interesting one.
I think you wouldn't have to go that far to show like the actual negative repercussions of it. But if they were able to make this character likable and compelling within the show, it would make the events of Star Trek Beyond probably more rewarding to watch that, because you could feel the weight of that tragedy.
Yeah.
This is a weird comparison, but I remember at one point there was this idea to make kind of a Smallville type show on the WB back then, before there was the CW, but it would be about like Bruce Wayne becoming Batman in his like early days, like he returns to Gotham when he's 18 years old, and he's trying to figure out how he's going to become this vigilante. And one of the things that I remember reading in like their kind of like their pitch for the show that eventually found its way online was that sometimes you'd be kind of cheering for Bruce as he's like growing as like this badass crime fighter, but at the same time there would be moments when you feel kind of sad for him because he is kind of going down this kind of
like he's going to lose the chance
path.
Right, he's going to lose his chance at a normal life.
Yeah. And you know like a character like Alfred who kind of like watches that and is kind of like, well, I wish you'd just like give it up and have like a normal happy life. But so I think there is. I always thought that sounded like it possibly would be cool. I think there is a certain way you can do something rewarding. Even if it's it's going to lead to like a tragic ending, there's still something rewarding in watching that unfold.
For sure. And he is one among an ensemble cast too. So, anyway, any other further thoughts, or shall we jump to our last and video format offering?
Yeah, or audio if you're listening to the.
That's true.
Podcast, but. We will go ahead and cut to our friend Boatwreck of the Boatwreck YouTube channel, and he's going to talk to you about his idea for a Star Trek show.
Hello, and welcome to Boatwreck. My name is PJ, and today I'm taking the TEX-TREK Create-a-Trek challenge, where I pitch my idea for a new Star Trek television series. Now, mine is called Star Trek: The Next Phase. It stars Michael Dorn as Captain Worf of the new Enterprise F, equipped with the phase-shifting cloaking technology first seen in the Season 7 Next Generation episode, The Pegasus. Now, at the time, that kind of thing was illegal because of the Treaty of Alderaan. Has something to do with the Romulan War, but it was signed in good faith, and the Federation was going to uphold that, and of course, Picard at the end of that episode exposes Riker's old captain, whose name escapes me, even though I just saw the episode like 2 days ago. So the Federation is at a point now where, the Treaty of Alderaan is irrelevant. I'm sorry. The Romulans are in no position to enforce it, and the Federation has changed, as we've seen in Star Trek Picard. So let's get into the crew. Okay, Worf is the captain. First officer is Ezri Dax. The second officer is a founder called Ebb, and there's also a Romulan science officer named Partek. I don't really know the personalities of these people, I'm just thinking of characters. Putting a lot of fan service in there because Geordie LaForge is the chief engineer, and his apprentice is Lieutenant Molly O'Brien, and Julian Bashir is the chief medical officer and ex-husband to Ezri. And we also have Soji from Star Trek Picard as a helmsperson, and she's going to be very useful. So their mission is to go to the Gamma Quadrant to seek out new life and new civilizations. Just that simple. The phase shifting technology, the cloaking the ship will be used for stealth purposes when needed, but the phase shifting, like moving through solid matter, which the Enterprise F is fully capable of doing. By the way, I'm calling it a Zenith class. I know, like Odyssey class, Enterprise F exists in beta canon. This is not that, although I wouldn't mind it looking like the beta canon Enterprise F. So before they get to the Gamma Quadrant, they have to go to the Bajoran wormhole, and DS9 is still there, and it's under the command of Kira Nerys. And Kira Nerys has a visual communication where she warns Ezri and Worf that a species called the Unyul are kind of running amok in the Gamma Quadrant. They're not that big of a threat yet, but their dominance is growing, and they're a far advanced non-humanoid species. Basically, I picture them as tall, skinny giants with really round golf ball-like heads, big insect-like eyes, and little mouths with like really sharp teeth. Kira warns Worf, hey, you gotta watch out for these guys, and Worf's like, hey, the Enterprise is prepared to defend itself if need be, but we will not be the aggressor. I think the first few episodes of this show would be very episodic, not really connected in a lot of ways, not really leading up to anything, but it is them establishing relations with a species that wants to join the Federation probably, or helping in a situation very TNG style. But then they run into the Unyul, and they come across a race or a sector even, that's begging Starfleet for help, and the Enterprise is there. They get caught up in some kind of battle, and one thing leads to another, and it's war. And the Enterprise finds that it has to call for backup on top of team up with other species in the Gamma Quadrant to say, we gotta stop this bully in the neighborhood. The stakes don't have to be like totally galactic, like the Unyul are gonna rule the Gamma Quadrant and then everywhere else. Therefore, it's just that they're like an asshole gang going out and expanding their territory because, and this is the motivation for the Unyul, is that their species was very pacifist, very technologically advanced, very much kept to themselves. But being pacifists, they were kind of almost wiped out a few times. And now the newer generations, especially since the 20 plus years since the Dominion War, the younger generations now reject the ways of their ancestors. If a good analogy would be like, it's like the Vulcans becoming the Romulans. I would like to see a scene with Patrick Stewart, LeVar Burton, and Michael Dorn on the Enterprise E, just one last visit before they take it wherever they take it. Right before they go on the Enterprise F, and Card gets the tour. He's there to see Soji off. So that's pretty much it. But this phase shifting technology, when they get caught in all this stuff and having to use it, of course, when they do have to use it, it will be known. Like, oh, look at this! Look at what they're doing. This is why it's not being really advertised that this kind of technology exists now on ships, and Enterprise is basically the first one that's eventually going to be using it openly. But it's not really a thing that they're yelling and screaming about. But perhaps when the Unyul see this technology, they may want to take advantage of it, and that could be a problem for Worf. I don't know, I just want it to end peacefully. I don't want the battle to become an all-out war that threatens like the whole galaxy or anything like that. So that's my pitch for a Star Trek show, Star Trek The Next Phase, about Worf commanding an Enterprise F equipped with phase-shifting cloaking technology. And they're exploring the Gamma Quadrant and meeting a few new aliens we haven't seen before. But we're going to see, Cardassian with a, on the same ship as an android, on the same ship as a Romulan, a Trill. I'm really thinking in terms of like if this was like a budgeted thing, like that interaction between Kira and Worf. I imagine like, okay, don't build the whole station, just build the office so you can have that on-screen communication, and you can just see the exterior of DS9. Just like with the Enterprise E, okay, they go and visit the Enterprise E, but they're not like walking through the hallways or anything. We just rebuild the bridge, or even just a section of it. And you'd put all the money into the Enterprise F set. I mean, it's like big, spacious, almost very reminiscent of the motion picture, where you got some areas like the recreation room where there were more open spaces, especially that conference room where the entire crew is standing there and they're watching that big screen of V'ger engulfing the space station. So yeah, I have to end this at some point. So I want to thank Fatheree and Dave at TEX-TREK for giving me this challenge and sparking my imagination and making me think about this kind of stuff. I know this video was very rambly, but I thank you for watching, and live long and prosper.
So yeah, that was Star Trek: The Next Phase. That would definitely be a fun watch if you're the type who's like, oh yeah, I'm ready to see all these familiar faces from Berman era Trek. Why haven't they all shown up on Picard yet? I'm ready to check in on them again. This would certainly be the show for you.
He's got Soji from Picard is there too, so it's a little bit of a kind of everybody from all worlds getting together.
Yeah, and I know as like a kid, I always loved Worf. He was kind of my favorite character from the TNG era and from DS9. So having a show about him as a captain would definitely appeal to kid Fatheree.
Fatheree, do you think if they were to make a show like this, what did Boatrek call his show?
Star Trek: The Next Phase.
Star Trek: Next Phase. If they were to do something like this, or any other iteration of a Worf thing, do you think is like Michael Dorn too old? Is there, I
know Michael Dorn really wants to do it. Like he's been lobbying for a Captain Worf show for a long time. So
is not too
we're
long.
trying to give it to you, Michael.
Yeah. I thought was interesting. What was it? They were on this one, the Enterprise. Would it be F?
Yes.
So and what's the technology? Would they call it transphasic cloaking device? What is it?
Yeah, so it's kind of a double entendre with the name, because it's like that phasing cloaking device that we saw on the Pegasus, a Next Generation, where it can kind of like shift out of like normal space and like pass through solid asteroids and stuff. Like that's how it cloaks. It's kind of like out of step with normal space.
He the way he described it, what occurred to me I thought would be kind of interesting about this, or what I would sort of want to see them dive into a little bit, was that it's a technology that they are not hiding, but they're also not promoting, I think, because it feels like it might create too much of a balance of power shift. It might be too much. It's it's kind of like bleeding edge technology to be out there in the open. And so I like the idea that it could suggest a kind of Star Trek-y arms race, or the danger of an arms race coming up. I
had a bit of that in my creative Trek challenge that I came up with the slipstream tech.
Right, absolutely. I think that's an interesting idea. This is something the world still deals with sometimes. It maybe less so, but the Manhattan Project is the thing that looms over everything. But there's, just the development of any sort of new missile, and I guess probably it's, they thought space-based technology was going to change everything in the 80s, like with the Star Wars stuff, but it really didn't. but these...
we're working on it. We got a Space Force now.
Yeah, I'm sure that they're going to be really very forward-thinking.
It has no assets in space, but...
Yeah. But anyway, I like the idea of seeing what Star Trek could do with those kind of questions. When he was describing the alien threat in there, whose name escapes me, the kind of tall, kind of creepy-looking aliens, it reminded me of the book Starship Troopers, the Skinnies, as they call them. I forget if they have an actual race name in that, but in addition to the Arachnids, they're another race that the Earth is at war with. And I was thinking that that's something we don't see too often, is like tall aliens in Star Trek. It's just a minor, but I think it would be a cool visual. I don't know how tall he meant, like whether he meant 10 feet taller or whether he meant like 20 feet tall. Probably not 20. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing some weirder, taller, stranger aliens occasionally.
Yeah, and I think Worf would be a really good captain to have if you are going to go up against an aggressive alien race like this that you have to go into combat against. But after that story, I would be curious to see Worf handle more delicate matters that might be outside of his comfort zone. I think that would be interesting to tell in a show like this, too.
Well, I did notice he made a point. He doesn't want this to be a war show, though. He wanted it to be a show where, like, maybe that loomed, like the threat of it was at least percolating, but it wasn't like a wartime show. So I think Worf, even as he describes it, would have to practice some diplomacy and not be just all boot heels. Although I wouldn't mind some Worf boot heels. That sounded sexual.
Yeah, that's what Deanna said around like season 7 of TNG.
I shan't judge her. Well, no kink shaming on TEX-TREK.
I think that's everything that we have to talk about. Yep. These are all the things that we liked most about these ideas that were sent to us. If there is anything in particular that you liked about any of them, by all means, let us know. And also, like we said at the top of the show, if you want to take a crack at creating your own Star Trek, then by all means, go ahead and do the TEX-TREK Create-a-Trek challenge and submit it to us however you want. You can email us, you can tweet at us, you can comment it on Facebook if you want. You can make a video and send us the link, whatever. And we'd be more than happy to look over that as well, because this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I was definite thanks to everybody who participated. Boatwreck said thanks to us for kind of like getting his creative wheels spinning in that way, and that was a fun thing for me too. I think that anybody who takes a shot at it will have a lot of fun with it and find themselves poking at, or thinking about ideas and constraints and difficulties of shows like this that they might not have otherwise thought of. It's definitely interesting to like task yourself with coming up with something that needs to like last a season or several seasons and all that. I think those are interesting creative challenges, and I think fun ones.
Yeah, and it's fun to play God or play Q, if you will, and be able to like be in control of your own little Star Trek universe and set it up exactly how you want.
Absolutely. It's like Sims Trek.
Yes, you can go mad with power.
And lock the people forever in the lavatory where they die.
I've never played Sims, but I guess that's a thing we'll do on that game.
I guess so. I don't play it either.
Well, but that's all we got. We're going to go ahead and sign off in a moment. Just to let everyone know, I think we'll be back sometime in June, just depending on how things go, what we have to talk about, if there's any new Trek news. Of course, later in the year, we will be talking about whatever Star Trek shows are out there. We're going to hopefully get Discovery Season 3. It sounds like that's still pretty likely. It sounds like we're still going to get Lower Decks. So we're definitely going to be back to talk about those. And hopefully in the meantime, we can maybe do some more DS9 talk or maybe do some animated series talk before Lower Decks gets here. But be sure that you are following us so that you don't miss out on any of that, because it's going to be a lot of fun this year. Hopefully, if we just get through this, I don't want to call it a rough patch, but this the turbulent time of the present, I think that there are brighter days ahead.
Right on.
And until next time, as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the TEX-TREK podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek, and follow Fatheree on Twitter at TX-TREK. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.